Welcome everyone to Monday Match Analysis. I'm Gill Gross. Jakub Mensik is your 2025 Miami Open champion. He wins his first career title in the most spectacular fashion you could ever imagine. It is a Masters 1000 title. He beats his idol, Novak Djokovic, in the final. 7-6, 7-6 to cap off a run that already had plenty of fireworks with a win over the Indian Wells champion Jack Draper in round number 2. A really impressive semifinal win over Taylor Fritz. Make it 3 top 10 wins on the run, 2 top 5 wins on the run. He is the only player in this century at 19 years old. He is the only teenager in this century to beat 2 top 5 players in a single event other than Carlos Alcaraz, Madrid 2022. That Madrid 2022 run is one that we remember to this day. Later on that year, Holger Rune won Paris-Bercy in 2022. We remember that to this day. This run is going to have a legacy like that, the arrival of Jakub Mensik in Miami. And I just want to start with the storytelling aspect of this before we get into any of the breakdown stuff and the technical stuff. A couple things. One, last week he lost in the semis in the Kopkana Challenger. So a guy who lost in the semifinals to Damir Zhumer in a Challenger, broke multiple rackets, won a Masters 1000 the very next week. There are a couple of takeaways there, but I'm just going to let it sit. Okay, I think it almost speaks for itself. Now, I don't know if his knee was bothering him during that semifinal in the Dominican Republic, but he was about to pull out of this event, which he revealed during the trophy ceremony. He talked a little bit more about it in his Tennis Channel interview. In fact, he tried to pull out of the event, and the referee was out to lunch. Not the expression out to lunch, literally out to lunch. So he went back into the physio room, and he got some treatment from our man Alejandro the physio. And Alejandro the physio pulled off some miracles here. And he got Mensik feeling well enough to take the court against RBA, ended up winning a 3-set match to begin this run. I don't know if that backstory also contributed to just how well his serve was dialed in throughout the week. It was an avalanche of aces against Jack Draper, for example, in the second match. Was part of that the mentality of, I better rain down aces because I'm trying to protect the knee? I don't know, but it is an unbelievable story that Mensik literally tried to withdraw from the very event that would end up being his absolute breakthrough in every sense of the word. 7-6, 7-6, as I said. We're going to get in the tiebreaks. We're going to talk about why I think Mensik is so well suited to win tiebreaks in general. We'll talk about the matchup that was so interesting here, Mensik serve against Djokovic's return. We will discuss 2 of Mensik's weaknesses in this match actually performing really well. That made things hard on Novak. He got, some of the game plan that Novak went into the match with, I think didn't end up working. We'll talk about Mensik's game in general, of course, and also what does this all mean for Djokovic, this Miami Open run that ends in disappointment. The wait for title number 100 carries on even further, but in terms of what we learned from this week as it pertains to the remainder of 2025, we'll talk about that as well. But first, I want to shout out my favorite Monday match analysis sponsor of all time, Go Sport. They're my favorite sponsor because they make an incredible tennis product. First and foremost, the best tennis bag I have ever owned, with superior organization due to its customizable shelf system, extreme durability, quality material, sleek design that matches all rackets. It stands up on its own, which I love. And you guys don't understand. You don't understand how convenient it is for the bag to stand up on its own until you experience it for yourself on court. I'm just going to say that. And I also personally relate to this brand because similar to Monday Match Analysis, where I saw a hole in the tennis media market, tried to fill it by myself, and really kind of did it out of a passion project without corporate backing or producers or tons of resources. Go Sport is similar. Chris, the founder, I've gotten to know a bit. He is from a family of tennis players. They got frustrated with the tennis bag market, decided to do something about it. They only focus on tennis bags, so they do it better than the big brands that juggle 70 different products at once. You can go to the link in the description. Use the code GIL10 for 10% off your order. The link will also lead you straight to the discount code in the description. Check that out. All right. So 2 tie breaks. Let's cover the bases. What happened in these 2 tie breaks? First set, Novak got into an early hole. Mensik started off the tie break with an ace. Then he hit a backhand return that hit the net cord, went over to Novak's side, very short in the court. It triggered sort of a cat and mouse exchange. Great speed by Mensik, really nice high backhand volley to finish, but obviously it was kind of a broken point because of the net cord. And then a very bad +1 miss from Djokovic to make it 3-love. I thought the 4-love point in this tiebreak was notable. It was just great defense and absorption skills by Mensik, where Novak actually played a really good point. He was dictating, and Jakub just hung in there with his defense and his movement, and eventually Djokovic missed. And then the set point was really great work by the 19-year-old. A forehand return that was excellent. We'll talk more about that in our analysis. An immediate backhand down the line on the 4th shot of the rally. We'll also talk about that as a common theme that set up a forehand approach and an overhead to take the first set. Now, the second set tiebreak was mostly about physicality and rally tolerance. There was a 21-shot rally at 2-all, and I should say going into the tiebreak, I'd say late in the second set, Djokovic started to show some signs of fatigue and physical duress. At 2-all, there was a 21-shot rally. Mensik hit a forehand cross-court that had decent width. It would have been no problem for Djokovic had he had a full tank of gas and 100% strength capacity in his legs. But at this point, he was simply too weary, and he kind of slapped at the forehand, netted it on the run, collapsed to the ground, didn't really have a solid base underneath him for that forehand. Then Mensik did give the mini break back with a poor backhand. They immediately played another lung-busting rally thereafter. And again, Mensik hits a loopy forehand cross-court, not a lot of pace. Djokovic sort of slashes at it and again puts this forehand into the net, looking tired for another unforced error. Just low percentage forehand trigger pulls with tired legs because of tired legs that really made the difference in this second set tiebreak. Djokovic missed a routine backhand on the next point for 3-6. That point was started by another great Mensik forehand return. And then Jakub hit a service winner to cap it off. It is also notable that Mensik hit 2 unreturnables in both breakers. Djokovic hit 1 in each tiebreak. So that was an advantage for Mensik throughout the match. He hit more unreturnable serves, aces and service winners than Novak, and he also did that in both tiebreaks. It gives him that little boost, that little extra that pushes him over the edge in 2 tiebreaks that were very, very tight in their own right. Both of them actually ended up being 7-4, right? I believe so. Anyway, sorry if I got that one wrong. That's off memory. Novak, though, I mean, think about it, guys. Novak is the tiebreak king. He is the return of serve king. I'm very happy to slap that label onto Novak Djokovic. Happily. And here comes Jakub Mensik winning this final 7-6, 7-6, hitting 56% first serves unreturned for the match. Let's start with the tiebreak aspect of this. And Mensik, I think 7-0 in tiebreaks over the course of this run in Miami. Let me verify that real quick. Let's see. So he wins 2 breakers against Draper. He wins that match 7-6, 7-6. He wins a third in the first set against Fils, which really put away the match because Artur was so tired that after dropping the first set, Mensik basically put the match away right there. And then against Fritz, he won the first set in a tiebreak and the third set in a tiebreak. So that's 5. And then against Djokovic, 1, 2, 7-6, 7-6. So Mensik goes 7-0 in tiebreaks in this tournament. He came into the event with a stellar record in tiebreaks. His career record is now 30-13. How good is that? All you got to do is look at what Djokovic has done throughout his career. Novak Djokovic's win percentage is 66.5% in his career for tiebreaks. That is the best mark of all time. I don't know what the minimum is at. Maybe it's 100 tiebreaks. I think that would be maybe a realistic minimum. But whatever the minimum is, Djokovic's win rate of 66.5% is the highest ever. Right now, Mensik, who is below the minimum, is at 70%. I don't want to act like I've never seen Jakub Mensik get tight before. I have. In fact, if you look at his performances at majors, he's lost a lot of heartbreakers. Most recently at the Australian Open, he lost to Djokovic Fokina from up 2-0. I've seen him get nervous. However, if you're asking me to interpret, first of all, what I saw in the tiebreaks in Miami, and also why I think Jakub Mensik is well positioned to be a great tiebreak player. First of all, great serves tend to hold up better under pressure than anything else, other than maybe great movement. There are two things that I don't think are usually overcome by nerves. Not to say that these things can't be affected at all by nerves, but they have more of a force field. They have better bulletproof padding against the poison that is pressure in tennis, and that is first serve and movement. Most players with great first serves, they trust it. They can use it in any situation, and they don't get tight on the first serve because it is so programmed. It is so mechanical, repeatable, that it just doesn't succumb to nerves. Same thing with movement. Normally, I'm not watching a match, and sometimes footwork can get sloppy. I get that. But I'm not normally watching a match and be like, man, this guy who's normally lightning quick, he's so slow. He's so nervous that he's slow. That normally doesn't happen, right? So those are the two things. And that, at the end of the day, is what is so enticing about Mensik's game. His serve combined with his movement. And if you look at some of the big points that he played against Taylor Fritz in those tiebreaks, long rallies, rally tolerance, movement, court coverage, that was key. And then big serves. And not only is the first serve deadly, he makes good, high percent. He's a high first serve percentage player, which is what you want in these breakers. Serve and movement. Great starting point if you want to be a great tiebreak player. Anyway, let's also zoom out and look at the matchup that I was most interested to see. And look, I thought Djokovic was going to win this final because I thought Mensik was not going to be getting the purchase on his first serve against Novak that he has been getting against everybody else. And I felt if Djokovic is going to be able to get into rallies on Mensik's service games, I think Novak will be able to get the better of those ball striking exchanges from the back of the court. That was my theory coming into the match, not one that I shared on this show or on YouTube, but I'll admit it, that was my theory. What ended up happening was Mensik's first serve, it was pretty darn effective. It was pretty darn effective against Djokovic's return. Mensik came into this match, into this final, at 60% first serves unreturned. There have been many a time where a player has come into a match against Novak with that kind of number for the tournament, and we see it plummet against Djokovic. We see it just go down into the dumps. Historically, that is what happens. But Mensik ended up, as I briefly mentioned, 56% first serves unreturned. So there was a 4% drop. 4% drop in this final compared to what he was doing against everything else. He signs up for that in a heartbeat. That is a great number for Jakub Mensik, considering the step up in competition, especially when it comes to the return of serve in particular. Djokovic was constantly leaning the wrong direction when he looked to get a jump on the Jakub Mensik serve. He had zero read on where it was going, which was a huge source of frustration. And there was a lot of dialogue between him and the box, led by Andy Murray, about, okay, how can we figure out how to get onto more of these Jakub Mensik serves? What does that tell you? It tells you that Mensik, first of all, does not have an easy tell based on his ball toss of where he's going to go with the serve, which is a quality that all great servers share. Serena Williams, Roger Federer, even Pete Sampras, Nick Kyrgios, John Isner, all of the great servers are able to hit any spot with the same consistent toss. Tennis Channel actually put up a Hawkeye graphic that showed it's basically the same toss every single time. Mensik is incredibly consistent. And then he's also got this quick fire, snappy service rhythm that I think makes it hard for returners to try to find a read on it. And I just love Jakub Mensik's motion. It's so gorgeous and fluid and elastic and loose. It's just a perfect service motion. Anyway, not only does Mensik have no tell based on his ball toss, he also has no tendencies. Because if you have no tell but you have tendencies, that's another way that your opponent can actually gain an edge on where you're going to serve the ball. Now let's flip it. Because Djokovic did have a tendency that Mensik took advantage of. Novak, on big points, was serving Mensik's forehand. Why? Because the data clearly says that Mensik's forehand is a weaker return. And my evaluation of Jakub Mensik, and I've watched him a lot at this point, I would have said the same thing. I would have said serve his forehand on a big point. Or serve his forehand more than his backhand. That's what I would have said. Well, I'll get into the details a little bit later on, but Mensik knew that. Mensik was leaning there in these tie breaks on these big points. And the fact that he knew where it was coming and I don't want to say guessed because I don't think he was completely selling out, but the fact that he was leaning that way and then he got the serve coming that way, it gave him a chance to actually hit his forehand returns really well in some of these big spots. Another thing, big picture, a theory that I've had, it should be addressed, it should be said. I think that Djokovic's first serve return has potentially declined more than any other aspect of his game in the last few years. That's just a theory I've had. I went to look at the data to try to see, am I onto something here? And I'll tell you that the data, it doesn't shut down my theory. It also doesn't emphatically support my theory by any means. I will share that data with you guys. In 2021, I'm only looking at the first serve. I want to know how well does Novak do against the first serve. In 2021, he won 35.8% against the first serve, second best on tour. In 2022, it was down to 33%. In 2023, it stayed there at 33.2%. So negligibly better, but basically staying at that range. And then last year, it did dip down to 32.6%. So you have a slight decline, but not a decline that is so stark that you could say, okay, the data is really obvious here, and that certainly Djokovic's first serve return has declined more than anything else. But it's just a thought because I do think he's been running into more of these situations than I remember, certainly in his prime, where he's facing a big server and the big server is actually kind of winning the matchup against his return. I felt this was an instance where Mensik serve won the matchup against Djokovic's return. Now let's talk about what happened in rally. A little bit of what happened off the ground. Mensik's forehand weakness. It did not materialize. There was a clear game plan for Novak. Djokovic wanted to take the ball deep down the middle at Mensik's forehand. He wanted to use the backhand slice down the line as well at Mensik's forehand, keep the ball low into that wing. The theory, of course, being that that's what will set up attackable balls. Maybe in some cases, you feel like you're going to force errors if you disrupt the contact point or if you rush that wing. But also, you expect some short balls, some weak balls that you can dictate off of. So Djokovic hit 47% of his backhands down the line. That says a lot. You also saw him use that backhand slice down the line, which I think he could have used more than he did. The one break of serve he got in the first set, midway through the first set, he actually drew 2 errors with it. And I thought after that he was going to deploy it often. He used it more sparingly than I would have thought. But what's also notable is he made an unforced error with it in the second set tiebreak. And the one negative with the backhand slice down the line, you're hitting a backspin shot over the high part of the net. That can get tricky sometimes. You need a great feel for it. And obviously, you don't want to hit that shot with a lot of net clearance. You want to keep it low, but you're contending with the highest part of the net. It's tough. I kind of digress, though. That is all to say that Djokovic wanted Mensik hitting forehands. And for the match, Jakub hit 135 forehands versus 122 backhands. What ended up happening was Djokovic ran into the same issue that Taylor Fritz ran into at the very end of their match. The forehand from the Czech was solid. It was not leaking errors. It was not leaking a lot of short balls. And when Mensik did have good attacking opportunities, including off of Djokovic's block returns, he usually cashed in on those opportunities. And then if you look at what happened on the Djokovic serve into Mensik's forehand, well, Novak served Mensik's forehand 32 times, backhand 25 times. This backfired. This tactic did not pay off, period, because Mensik ended up making 81% of his forehand returns versus 68% of his backhand returns. That was not the plan. The plan was for the forehand return to be less reliable, to get more service winners into that wing. It ended up being the reverse. 81% forehand returns in play. That's an excellent number. And if you look at how many great forehand returns Mensik made in the tiebreaks, even more notable. So it backfired. And there is something to be said for Mensik's forehand as a weakness, because as much as I don't like the technique, as much as I think ultimately the forehand, if it doesn't change from what it is right now, is going to hold him back, it usually goes in the court. It is not a particularly erratic weakness. And if you are a player, especially a player with so many other strengths and good movement, if your weakness is not an erratic weakness, that's the best kind of weakness. You take that any day over a weakness that gets sloppy and gifts a lot of errors. Mensik's forehand is not very heavy. He doesn't get a lot of topspin, a lot of RPMs on his forehand. It can be a little bit weak when it's rushed, when he's stretched out on it. He doesn't get as much on the ball as most of the top players do in those situations. But if you go into that forehand expecting errors, you might be in for a surprise, because at times the forehand can be pretty darn stable, especially when he's defending with it. And that can be a shock if the plan coming in is to attack that wing. Now, that said, it doesn't mean that Mensik's forehand isn't a weakness, because Tommy Paul has great forehand days. Karen Khachanov has great forehand days. Hubie Hurkacz has great forehand days. For Mensik, this was probably an above-average forehand tournament. But at the end of the day, it's about consistency. if we're talking about this match, Mensik's forehand performed. The best part about how it performed, though, is where he was going with it. The way he was hitting it indicated that not only did Jakub Mensik manage his forehand weakness by staying pretty solid on it, he also managed it by pattern breaking away from it. Essentially, Mensik was hitting his forehand down the line for days. Not aggressively. Not an aggressive forehand down the line that he's attacking. No, just rallying his forehand down the line, which is somewhat atypical. But Mensik hit 47% of his forehands down the line. Why? Because he wants the backhand-to-backhand exchange. Yes, even against Novak. Even against Novak, it's a far better pattern for him versus the forehand-to-forehand. He knows that. He understands that about his game. So he takes his forehand down the line. He gets Djokovic to hit a backhand cross court. And then, boy, does he trust his backhand down the line. He is so proactive, Mensik, about using his backhand down the line, which is his best ground stroke. But how often did we see this from Mensik? And this is knowing your game. How often did we see Mensik take his worst shot, play it in a way that feeds the ball into his best shot, and immediately deploying his best shot with proactive aggression? Discipline with your weakness, confidence with your strength. That's the kind of shot selection I'm looking for. Mensik nailed it in this match. What's Mensik's other weakness? It's, if you asked me before the match, if you watched my Instagram reel before the match, you would have seen that I called Mensik's forehand his first weakness. Second weakness is the second serve. That didn't materialize either if Novak was looking to take advantage of that. And certainly that would have been part of the conversation. Part of the conversation would have been, he hits a slow, attackable second serve that averages around 90 miles per hour. Let's attack that. Wasn't there to attack. Mensik lifted his average second serve speed in this match by 13 miles per hour. And he only double faulted once. Begs the question, where is this for all the rest of the matches he plays? If you can go 13 miles per hour faster and only hit one double fault, it's like, I mean, maybe the approach should be a little bit different on the second serve across all matches, but whatever. Because out of respect for Novak, he looked to redline that shot. I mean, nobody attacks second serves, takes them early, directs them deep in an uncomfortable place in the court. No one does that better than Djokovic. Mensik knows that, and he's like, well, the 90 mile per hour second serve is not going to cut it tonight. So instead, he ramped it up. So you take stock in Mensik's game. The forehand can be vulnerable. It wasn't in this final. The second serve can be vulnerable. It wasn't in this final. The backhand is phenomenal, and it showed. The serve is phenomenal, and it showed. And the last piece, I talked about his movement a little bit when it comes to tiebreaks, but when I first watched Jakub in February of 2024 in Doha, it was the serve with the movement that had me head over heels, that blew me away. When he was going corner to corner and absorbing Rublev's best punches off the ground, I thought, oh my God, this guy's going to have one of the best serves in the world. And he moves around the court a lot like what we see from like a Daniil Medvedev type. And he comes forward and hits drop shots and all that stuff. Well, the movement played a big role here because, first of all, of how he was able to extend rallies and wear down Djokovic in the second set tiebreak. And also the drop shot. And Novak has been workshopping a forehand drop shot throughout Miami. I don't think Novak hit a single dropper that Jakub didn't get to He was there every single time. And that was just one way that he displayed the speed. Point being, when Mensik plays a match and the forehand is stable and the second serve is actually pretty big and unattackable, and the strengths are firing that we're used to seeing, the redirection and the depth and the consistency on the backhand, the big first serve and the movement. I mean, this is a beast. This is an absolute beast to contend with, and that's why it was such a well-deserved victory for him. He really did play remarkable tennis. Let's shift over to Novak Djokovic. What does this all mean for Novak? First of all, a positive event as a whole. Night and day from last year. If you look at just where we were at with Novak in March, late March 2024. Goran Ivanisevic had just stepped aside. Djokovic had pulled out of Miami seemingly for motivational reasons. No injury, just motivational reasons. And then he did not really find a level that resembled his true self until Roland Garros. And even RG was a bit of a struggle in some matches that you would think maybe he'd get through a bit easier if he were at his best. So it was not coming easy for Novak. This, despite the disappointment on Sunday, where, by the way, a lot of things were going on. There was a massive delay, massive, 6-hour rain delay, swollen right eye because of a sty that he had. I assume it didn't affect his vision at all, but obviously uncomfortable and annoying, and takes up some unwanted energy, and mentally that can actually take a toll, I believe, when you have something that's bothersome like a sty in your eye. And the humidity was a massive annoyance to Novak as well during the match. On a rainy night, or after such a rainy day in Miami, it's like the rainforest out there. But anyway, despite the disappointing championship Sunday, everything we saw from Miami and this run indicates a much stronger run-up to Roland Garros is in store this year, assuming good health. And that's what's kind of been missing over the course of the last year and change for Djokovic, is a good, consistent run of elite tennis. This is a starting point coming into the clay court season. He is far ahead of schedule compared to where he's been. Not just last year, but the few years prior. As I've said, first quarterfinal in March since 2016. First quarterfinal in March since 2016. We'll see how it looks in Monte Carlo. I know that there are allegations of this was a cakewalk draw, and that's why he made the final. And this wasn't such a positive week. I see that out there. That is totally missing the point. He was not beating these players. He was crushing them. That has to matter. The level was undeniable from Novak Djokovic. It would be one thing if he were scraping through, if he were, barely beating Lorenzo Musetti, barely beating Seb Korda, just getting by against Grigor Dimitrov. That's not what it was. When you beat Musetti 2-2, when you beat Dimitrov, who made the final last year, even a tired Dimitrov, when you beat him 2-3 and you dominate on your serve, and your ball striking and your movement looks as good as it did for Djokovic. I mean, some of this just comes down to the eye test, and it's like, please, can we just use our eyes and look at the tennis he's playing? But even if you look at the results in itself, it's one thing beating top 20 players. I understand that we're not handing Novak Djokovic the Roland Garros trophy and major number 25 because he beat Lorenzo Musetti on a hard court. Nobody's trying to say that, but when you beat him 2-2, it is impressive. And then if you dig into the details here, superhuman serve accuracy, above 75%, all 6 matches, highest first serve percentage of his career against Dimitrov, 5th highest of his career against Korda, 16th highest of his career against Hijikata. I don't think this was an approach thing. I don't think he was like, I'm going to take off my first serve, or I'm going to hit my first serve into more passive targets, more central in the box. I just think his first serve was impeccable and remarkably good. And you can say, well, that's not going to matter on clay. I agree that it matters less. Let's not forget that Alcaraz last year in the finals, the Paris Olympics, on court Philippe Chatrier, couldn't get into return points on a regular basis because Djokovic's first serve accuracy and his +1 forehand in combination was just that overwhelming. So I don't buy that the serve just doesn't matter because it's clay. But I will admit that I think Novak Djokovic, with the serve rhythm that he established in Miami, he wishes that Wimbledon started tomorrow. I'm sure. But it doesn't. The one vulnerability this week for Djokovic was the endurance. And we saw that at points against Rinky Hijikata. We saw that at points against Camilo Hugo Carabelli. Maybe a teeny bit even against Korda. Now, I watched him this week. I thought, movement looks great. He's speedy. He's fast around the court. Ball striking really good off both wings. The consistency is back off the ground. You feel like he's got that Djokovic-esque control of the ball. Serve was firing on all cylinders. So all this was great. The one area where I thought, not so good was the endurance, because I saw him pushed into the red physically pretty easily on a pretty regular basis. But what I was thinking is, that's really hard for opponents to take advantage of, especially when Djokovic is serving like that. You need to get into physical rallies. Good luck when he's not missing any first serves. Good luck making the match as physical as it needs to get in order for you to take advantage of that. What I would say, though, long term, as it pertains to Djokovic's endurance, is that, one, Miami humidity is a rare beast, and it tends to make players look less fit than they are because it is so difficult cardiovascularly with that humidity. The second thing, perhaps more importantly, fitness levels generally improve for Novak as majors near. So I look at this Miami run as an enormous positive for Novak Djokovic. I am far more optimistic that major number 25 is in the cards. Far more optimistic today than I was 2 weeks ago. That said, Jakub Mensik, one last congratulations. Remarkable performance. I can't say I'm surprised. Maybe I didn't think it was going to come this soon. Maybe I didn't think it was going to come before this Miami Open started, but I was pretty confident it was going to come soon enough, because Jakub Mensik has the goods, with a capital G, to be a top player in this game for years and years to come. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.